Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a software development instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to make an edit view in Blazor. And currently, what we have is the following. We have a pretty simple list view, and we click on this, we get this detail view. But let's say we want to be able to edit it. Um, so I'm going to take this page, I'm going to convert it over to an edit view. And right now, what we have is we have basically just shows these values. So the simplest way would be to just put inputs in here. And I'm going to leave the ID alone because generally we don't want to edit that. We want the database to take care of that. But we'll make an input here and we'll say, we're going to use bind value. And this will bind this input to the title block. And we'll set the type for this one is equal to text. Now, these description and turn instructions are a little bit larger. So rather than using an input, I'm going to use um, a text area. And what we find is with the text area, the bind value doesn't work as smoothly. So we're just going to use bind. And I'm going to use the same sort of thing here. And then this is going to be an input again. I like that checkbox. So let's see what this looks like. And we can modify it. And you can see actually it goes back and it changes the list view. And it persists here, but if I refresh this, uh, actually it does work because it's a singleton right now. So we now have the ability to edit these. Um, we're going to find though that our mock has a little bit of a it almost works too well in a sense because it just automatically is allowing us to do that. We do need though to simulate a database with this a little better. So what we really need in here is we need a way to update, to simulate updating our badges. And so we're going to add a method here. And I like to keep my CRUD method names kind of generic here. And we're going to just say, we're going to bring in a badge. And once we have this badge, we need to find the one that we need to modify. And we're going to use link to do that. So we're going to say, uh, we're going to do a where clause here. We're going to say where the badge dot ID equals the badge ID. We're going to grab the first or default badge here. And then what we'll do is we're going to say, we're going to go through and set the title equal to the badge dot title, the description, set that equal. I think we got turning instructions. So we've got all these updates happening, and then we are going to um, we'll want to check to see if it's null. So if existing does not equal null, or if it equals null, let's just put a guard in here. And then that way we know that we have a badge before we get to here. And then once we have that modified, that existing badge will be modified. So this kind of simulates um, better what happens when we update. And the other thing that we're going to, yeah, so that should be good. See, I don't think we need that. Now, once we have that, we also need to put this into the interface. So we'll go to our interfaces, open up our interface, and we'll add that as one of the methods in the interface. So anytime you add a method to one of your services, you need to make sure the interface has that same service so that when it gets injected, because we inject the interface, not the full up concrete implementation. So now what we could do is we could say, okay, well, typically what we're going to have, we're going to need a button here. And this one on click, let's make a method called on submit click. And then we need that method. So do protected void on submit click, and we're just going to make this parameterless because we have this, we know it's this badge that we're updating. And then we're going to await. So yeah, that needs to be a task. And then we need to rename this to be asynchronous by convention. So we're going to take this badge, pass it to this update method that's referenced in the interface, which is implemented by our data service here, which is going to find the badge in our list, and then we'll update it from the badge that we get in. Now, you may be wondering, well, why do we need to do all that? Why couldn't we just recognize that this badge is ultimately it's going to come from here originally? Well, we're actually going to see that there's instances where we're going to need to add a badge later too. So we will need to do it. We do need to have methods to do this in our service. And when we get the database, it's going to become even more important. So we'll build it this way. We have our update method, and let's see if that works. And yep, it looks like it appears to be working. And so now the next thing to do is, well, if we have the ability to edit the badge, we probably should have an ability to add a badge. So I'm going to add a button actually underneath my list view. And this one is going to be add a badge. So how do we handle adding a badge? Well, down here, what we can do, actually, let's try. I don't think it needs to be async yet. We're just going to say, we'll just instantiate a new badge. Once we instantiate a new badge, that should cause this to open up because of the null check, and we should be able to edit this badge. So let's try that. And we've got a brand new badge. Notice the ID number, it's all zeros at this point. and we get an unhandled error. Why do we get an error when we click submit? Well, we're deep in this client proxy thing. I'm going to step out of this method, see where we end up. Okay, we end up there, climb out of that one, climb out of this one, climb out of that one. So all of these, when you have an error in an asynchronous method, it tends to go pretty deep into the exception or into the, so let's see if we can figure out where that error is again. So I'm going to close this up. Let's run it again. System null reference, object reference is not set to an instance of an object. Okay, but where are we? Let's look at the call stack. And we're all in these threading things. So I'm just going to jump through these and see where they end up. Okay, we're in our task. Let's jump out. There's unhandled exception on the current circuit, so it's terminated. You don't get much hints there. Here's what's actually happening is, let's put a stop point right here. Part of your hint is this number here, submit. I'm going to step in. And here we are at the update. There's our problem. When we look for this badge, because it's new, it doesn't exist. So there's a couple ways of handling this. And probably the most straightforward way for now is just, we're going to put, make an add async method. We're bringing a new badge, and from here, we just need to say badges. So first we need to take the badge and give it an ID. Now, if we have a database, it's going to do this itself. Now, the ID is a string. Oh no, in this case, the ID is a good. So we're going to use the good method to make a new ID. If it was an integer, we would have to go check all the badges, get their IDs, and make it the next ID number. If it's a string good, then you'd have to convert this to string. In our case, we made the ID here, we can see is a good. So we're just going to use the good method. And then what we're going to do is uh, once we've set a good to it, we can just say badges at that badge. And then because it's a task, now we're doing these tasks from results. I guess this one could have been true as well. Doing these tasks for results, when we work with a database, we're going to be using asynchronous methods to work with the database. So in our mock, we can just we'll use these task from result methods to simulate that we're finishing a task. In the database, we'll actually be doing real asynchronous methods. So now we've got this add method. In our mock, of course, if we add a method here. We need to go find the interface so that it becomes available to us. So now it's in our interface. And then here, so now back in our badges page, when we submit, we have to determine if we are adding or updating. Well, one way we can do that is we can say if badge dot ID equals. Now, if it's a string, we would look for null or empty, but because we're using a GUID, we're going to say if it's an empty GUID, then we're going to add the badge. Else, we will update it. So if it's an old existing badge, it'll have a GUID. If it doesn't, if it's a new badge, it'll be empty, and so we won't have to do that. Now there's a null check there, so I suppose we should do this. And actually, typically, you would just want to have a message at this point because this is at the top end of the UI. So I'm just going to throw an exception at this point to handle it for now. And we'll go to our badges and we'll add a badge, test it. And we now have the ability to add a badge. Okay, so what else do we need? Well, we have the ability to add, we have the ability to retrieve it, we can update it. We now need ability to delete it, these. So we'll put a delete button here. And so up here in our list view, we have this button. It's getting kind of busy, so I'm going to put everything on its own line. And we'll add a second button. And this one will be danger. This just makes it red. And we're going to do the same sort of thing. We're going to pass a badge in. We're going to need this on delete click method. And down here, we'll add a delete. And I think this is going to be asynchronous too. So make this async task. And it's kind of more associated with this on submit. So I'm going to, well, actually not on submit. It's uh, yeah, it's more associated with this area up here on view clicked. And but it's going to be asynchronous because we are going to call a delete method. And this one we will need to pass in the badge. And what we're going to do is we're going to want to await our data service. Now, our data service doesn't have a delete method yet, but maybe we can get it to write for us. It says it doesn't have it. What's kind of neat is sometimes you can do this. It won't do it for us. So we need this async delete method. We're going to go to our so we're going to have a delete here, and then we are going to go to our badges data service and add a delete method. You know, it seems to want to call it remove. Um, I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to call it remove. And then what this is going to do is we're going to need to find the existing badge. And so it's going to be very much like this. We need to use the badge ID. Now, if you think about it, well, do we really need the whole badge to do this? We really don't. So maybe what we could do is we could just pass in a good for an ID for the ID, and then we can just do this. So that means that if I make that little change, then I'll change this here in the data service. And then in here, I don't need to pass in, remove, I mean, in the badges page. Now it's not looking for the whole badge, it just needs the ID. So I could just do that. So rather than having to have a whole badge, if we just know the ID, that's all we need to do to delete. And it just makes it um, a little more streamlined if we do it that way. Because we're going to want to search for it in the existing database anyway to delete, because we can't guarantee the object here always stays the same as the one that was passed in, especially when we start working over the internet and are no longer on the server. Okay, so we have a delete. Let's see if that works. And it looks like, and we have some persistence going on. Uh, Now, if we stop the application and start it up again, the way our mock works is actually it will bring them back, which is kind of nice for testing purposes. And that's what our mock is here for, is to allow us to do testing. So you don't have to worry about deleting everything. It does persist while we're running it. Start it back up, and your badges are all back. So now we can retrieve, we can update, we can insert, and we can delete. Now that's interesting. Notice that it's still here, which is kind of weird, and we get a weird exception. What we need to do is we need to make this actually, when we submit, what we need to do is set the badge equal to null in order to make sure that clears out. So we set that to null when we submit. That way it hides it. And if we delete it, we don't get this confusion. So if I make a change, and it's kind of how you want this to work. So we have a pretty decently working page. It doesn't look great. There's some restyling, and there's actually a lot of different ways you can make these pages set up. So, but for now, this is a fundamentally good working page with an edit view. Thank you very much.